Hey guys, and welcome back to another lecture. In this lecture, we'll be talking about some basics of CT and T-side positioning and movement. In a sense, we're talking mainly about like how you want to operate within a round. So less about your cross replacement and your actual like mechanics in the terms of like counter strafing and aiming and stuff. A lot more about how you want to think about your positioning and some basic rules you want to follow to keep yourself alive for longer and to kind of play the game in a way that is sustainable and consistent with you and your teammates. So we'll start off with CT side because it's obviously the one where you're doing the most holding, and holding and positioning are kind of the same thing in a sense. When you're a CT, you kind of have to hold angles, and your positioning kind of lets you know which angles you're going to hold. But the key to good CT positioning beyond everything else, just if you learn anything else from this is the thing you should learn, is that the key to good CT positioning is staying alive. And the reason that is because if you stay alive on this site, and the T's being they obviously, if the T's aren't able to come after you, and they aren't able to kill you, or they aren't able to deal with you immediately, every second that you use up of their time is a second that your teammates are rotating over to your site, are able to crunch in more and take away control of the map from the TDs that they might possibly take if they get a faster take on your site. So the key fact is that your goal is to stay alive above all else, really, because staying alive means you are retaining control of the site in a way that means, okay, if they come over here and I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, bombs out A, they're coming, they threw all the smokes. Your team rotating in is going to have a lot easier time if you die like at 20 seconds after the exec starts and there's two guys rotated off B, you got two dudes CT, two jungle. You have a lot more control than if, let's say, the round starts, they throw the smokes, you instantly die to Palace, and now they have all of A, and they run to CT, and they kill your stairs guy, and now they have all of CT. They could possibly have stairs and jungle. They have so much more map control. Whereas if you keep yourself alive by just trying to do your best and make the best peaks and positioning that you can, you're going to end up with a lot better outcome consistently for your team, and also just round by round, you're going to give yourself more of a chance to have a big impact for your team. And so for this lecture, some of the rules are kind of more of like tips than they are like rules you have to follow, but they're basically operate the same. A rule is obviously something you want to use to teach yourself how to play, and you want to stay within, right? Rules are things you don't break. And this is kind of the same, but they might sound a little different. So in this case, rule number 1 is going to be, like we just talked about, stay alive. And so what that breaks down into is a couple different decisions you have to learn to make, and that is taking peaks that minimize your chance of getting killed, taking peaks that are useful, so not just because you want kills, right? You need to take peaks that are very useful in the sense that they have a goal, and that goal is to either keep you alive longer, to help a teammate out, or to minimize the T's ability to take control. And then the third part is just positioning yourself in a way where you're not having to deal with multiple angles. That's the biggest one. Is that if you position yourself properly where you're not having to fight multiple fights, you're going to have a lot easier time, which is why you often see CTs playing what's called retake. And by retake, that means you're in somewhere like CT here on Mirage, and the other guy plays stairs or jungle or connector or wherever, and you're playing retake. You're giving them the site control, but you're protecting the CT jungle stairs area control, so that way when the T's are done planting, your team is ready to retake. Either you get kills while they're doing the planting, because you're in a very good position to stop that, obviously, right here, but you also are going to give yourself that ability to, okay, they've planted, now we're already in position to force them into fights, right? And we, as a CT retaking, we want to force them into fights as early as possible a lot of the time if your team's all there. Now, if your team is not ready to retake, you might want to wait till you have people to trade out. But if your team's playing a retake setup and you're like, yep, they're taking A, you're taking A, you're likely to have a teammate here to help you immediately. You start hearing a plant, you come across, you try and take some people out as they're coming out, ramp a little bit maybe, or if as they're smoked and stuff, you kind of just deal with the bomb planters. So spamming bomb spots, whatever. Your job is to kind of harass them as your team rotates, and then you want to start taking deliberate fights to limit how long they have to go get their afterplants. But the other part of that retake is that what you do is you force them into very knowable spots. If you're in CT retaking and you're keeping yourself alive, you're going to force them into very knowable spots. In the sense of like they can only go Firebox, Palace, Ramp, Tetris, right? That's the only options they have, Sandwich as well. If you know you have stairs and CT, that's their options. And then they could flank connector, but that's not really what you're worried about at the beginning. But the key here being that retake works because your job is to stay alive, maintain control, and only take peaks that are beneficial to kind of beneficial and not too risky, right? So the same thing applies when you're in the middle of a site. So to follow rule 1 in the middle of a site's a little bit harder. Staying alive is a bit less up to you, but there are some things you can do to keep yourself alive. So again, like we said, take good peeks. So good peeks means don't do this. If you do this type of peek and just swing out in the open, you'll notice we have to deal with this guy. One of the bots went rogue and ran away. You'll have to deal with this guy, and realistically someone sitting over here as well. Oh, and so like this whole area could be occupied with T's, right? So when you take a peek like that, you're basically just saying, hey, I don't know which angle I'm going to fight. I don't know where my fight's going to come from. All I know is that I'm just trying to get a kill. And that's not really a good enough reason to peek in the first place, because you don't have to have kills to win the round. And two, it's just not a good peek for you in general because you can't slice the pie, you can't counter strafe into them properly. It's a lot harder to do well. So then if we want to take a good peek, we want to do something like this, which is we place a guy there, we'll place one up here, and we'll see what we can do. So we got a guy up there, we got a guy, let's pretend he doesn't exist. So that guy doesn't exist anymore. And then this guy's up here, this guy's over here. And so we have two options. Well, we can either take a nice, very slicing the pie heavy, good peek and go, okay, cool, shoulder peek, oh, see him, and then you can kill the guy, right? So you're taking a very much more limited peek, looking for some kills as they come out. You might still die if they headshot you, because that is a very fair fight for a T, honestly. They can headshot you very easily. But at least you're not throwing yourself into a multi-person fight, breaking the slicing the pie rules, peeking into more than one new angle at a time. You're being safe about it. And if that's the type of peek you want to take, that's a risk that is okay. But then when you're CT side, there's also peeks that are a lot more useful. So these are those useful peeks I was talking about. Peeks that do things for you and also do them in a safe way. So like when you know they're out on Tetris, you can just back up behind default and delete this guy, and he most of the time won't be looking at you. Even higher level players often forget this angle just because it is kind of awkward, and because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense of why this guy can kind of just see over top of his box, but it's very easy to just murder him, right? So this is the type of peek that you look for. Okay, getting info, and you're also able to get a kill. But during all of this, you'll notice you're still exposed to Palace the entire time. And that's where teammates come in. When you're positioning yourself, you have to make certain risk assumptions. And a lot of those are, is my teammate going to help me or am I going to help me? And that's basically like this. If you have a teammate who's playing stairs and they're not smoked off, or they can hold Palace, then you're fine, right? I'm holding Palace. You're generally going to be able to tell if they run out Palace because you'll hear them. Your teammate will shoot and they'll call it out, generally. So you can play off of that. So like you're playing right here, you come across, so that guy, oh, got one guy Palace, you crouch down, you deal with him, right? And you get that from your teammate holding with you. So that's kind of how you play that if you have a teammate. But if you don't have a teammate, your positioning rules come into effect again. And that is essentially, if you're going to deal with these angles, you need to have some kind of plan. So be that of like a very awkward to throw, but at least doable smoke that kind of helps you, or a Molotov that you can just kind of chuck and hope lands. Maybe, right? Like things that can kind of keep you alive, or it can mean just standing still and just dealing with Palace and right here, because this is actually something you can do. Because what you're doing here is Rule 2. So this is where we get into Rule 2. And Rule 2 is you want to make you want to make the T's deal with you. And by what I mean when I say that is you want to avoid giving them the fights that they want, unless you need to, or unless you have the opportunity to. So this is an opportunity fight. This is a good fight for you to try and get. It's not too reckless. It's very much in your favor because it's very hard for the T to know exactly what to do, and it's very easy for you to get the fight or just leave if you don't get the fight, right? But, well, not leave the area, leave the angle. But when you're dealing with this type of position where you're very much exposed, but it's not like it's an angle you can just kind of avoid ever playing. Like, you do need to play default sometimes. It happens. And you have to deal with these things in terms of making them deal with you. So, Rule 2. And what that means is, rather than coming out here and just giving them fights and kind of opening up the idea that this guy can swing out and just, take care of you for his teammates' ramp, trade you out, basically, which is what you're looking to avoid, is getting instantly traded. You want to get 2 kills. If you get 2 kills in CT, you're doing fantastic. So by playing like this, saying, okay, I'm going to make you come and fight me, you give yourself a chance. Now, it might be a slim chance. You might get Molotov'd off. You might get flashbang. Whichever way this happens is up to how good the T's are, right? But you don't want to be the guy that gives the bad T's a chance to get you. You want to be the guy that said, okay, come deal with me. I'm going to fight you. And if they swing the corner, kill him, and that guy tries to trade, there's 2 kills right there. So you'll notice if you ever watch a pro demo or just a pro game like on a Twitch stream, you'll catch a lot of the times even professional players struggle with these types of trades. Because what happens is, one, even if you're like dead on watching the radar, or if your teammate's like, I'm swinging, there's a very much a delay between communication, action, and reaction. There's a delay there, and you want to take advantage of that delay as a CT, and that this guy, especially in a pug, a face it, or even a league match in lower levels, isn't very much going to be in tune with this guy. Because this guy's worried about this over here. He's worried about a lot of stuff. So he's probably not going to be too deliberate with his peaks at first. And it's going to give you a chance to go, okay, this guy swings, took care of him, right? And that's a fight that's winnable, that you have a chance at, and it doesn't get you killed when you come out here. You might kill this guy, but this guy instantly trades you because it's a lot easier for him to come out and just delete you once they know exactly what's happening. They know, okay, he's out shooting, and then this guy just comes in, takes that basic swing, trades you, and now, especially if they have smokes, he doesn't have anything to worry about, right? So that's why when the smokes and stuff come out, we go to rule 2. When you're stuck in place, when you don't feel comfortable, when you feel like you have too much stuff to watch, rule 2, make them deal with you. Hide in your place, go to wherever you can that isolates the fights in front of you, and it's very unlikely someone sprints behind you until you've killed the first 2 guys anyways, so we're just going to have to make that assumption. And again, the game is a game of assumptions, making risky plays that have high percentage chances. So rule 2 is about noticing when you're not going to gain anything by coming out here and taking these big old fights, and following rule 1, not doing the fights like this to begin with, and then even these types of fights, trying to avoid them, and instead just hunkering down and playing to your reactions, dealing with the angles that you can keep in front of you, which is, again, a golden rule. You want to try and keep everything in front of you. That is a good way to play the game in general, because if everything's in front of you, you at least have a chance, you can at least hit these shots, whereas if you're trying to 180 everything here, it's a little bit more reckless, a little bit more up to the percentage gods, right? You just don't know for sure. So the other part of this is when you're dealing with positioning is when you get into the rules that are kind of about your decision making in the sense of game sense. That's where you have to look and say, okay, is it worth me making an aggressive play right now, or is it worth me playing passive right now? So that's when what you're looking for is essentially, okay, do I want to go and take a fight, or do I want to fall off, or do I want to wait on a teammate, or do I want to help a teammate? Those are the types of plays that aren't so much of a rule. They're just the type of plays you need to look out for in terms of your game sense and how they are repetitive for you. So basically, what those end up looking like is, let's say you have a teammate on stairs who comes over here and he's playing stairs and he's trying to fight Palace repeatedly. If he comes out and swings like this and he sees a guy front ramp and he's like, oh, one out ramp, that's the type of peek you'd probably be okay taking, because he's already cleared stairs, it's generally not going to, or he's already cleared pals, it's generally not going to be the most occupied angle in the world at the moment. You come across and you deal with this guy, right? And that's a kill that you can take a risk on. That's the type of trade / team play that you want to be taking, because it makes sense. Your goal is obviously to trade. You don't want this guy to be dead for free, because that's bad for you, and you just generally want to look for those opportunities that are generally safe and follow our rule 1 and 2 pretty decently. But let's say this guy full sprints up ramp, runs in like this, and you feel like, oh, well, I kind of need to help him, and you kind of start working your way towards ramp. You don't have to be that guy unless you guys have something where you've talked it out. You both understand kind of what's going on. You have your window player holding your palace. Unless you kind of have a good idea of what's happening, that's the type of play you don't be afraid to not do. In a pug especially, but even with teammates, you want to make sure that everyone understands the goal there. And so what that kind of looks like is on Inferno B is a very popular one. If your teammate's playing top banana and you feel like, well, they just keep mollying, nading, and flashing us off, and we're just not prepared to fight for that control, don't be afraid to say, hey, let's just play sight. That's the type of decision making more than it's not so much made in the moment, it's made before you ever get to your site. And that's where rule 3 is kind of more about a mindset. You want to play as a CT from the very beginning with a plan in mind. You want to say, okay, I'm going to play aggro this round, or I'm not, and then you just change it as the round goes on. So if they're all in mid, coming up mid, and he's 4 mid, you might want to look for a lurker. You might want to say, okay, well, I kind of expect that they might lurk a guy out A here, because when there's 4 people mid, typically something silly's happening anyways. There might be a guy lurking out, so you might hold for that lurker while your connector and stairs or connector and window player kind of work together, and you're just kind of in charge of looking for that lurker, right? That's the decision you can make mid-round that changes, but your goal is still the same that round. You're just holding A, trying to kind of see if anyone comes out, trying to help your teammates out, trying to make sure they don't get flanked while they're dealing with the mid push. That's your goal. But when you come out here and your teammate rushes into ramp, your goal isn't probably to rush ramp with him unless you've talked about it. So don't feel like you need to just play to save a teammate who's just trying to get themselves killed. That's a really big rule that'll help you out in pugs. And as a team, it's a rule that you can learn to follow that is kind of a more abstract idea, in the sense that what you're looking to do there isn't save your teammate. Sometimes it's save yourself from dying, in a sense that you just have to let a teammate die. And again, if you watch pro demos, you'll see that constantly. They will just let their teammates die because it's just something where it's going to be more harmful to your team if you overextend yourself to fight Tetris because, your CT player comes out and he kind of swings out and dies. If you overextend all the way out here to fight Tetris and you get insta-killed from ramp or palace, that's worse. And it might feel like, oh, I can get the trade, no problem. Well, you might be able to, but you have to understand that other Ts are going to be doing the same thing you're doing for their T. So look out for those scenarios that you might be overswinging, you might be putting yourself in a bad scenario because you're trying to do too much for your teammate. That's a good way to kind of improve your overall game sense, but also it'll keep you alive a lot on CT side because a lot of deaths come from a desire to help your teammates, which is great. You just can't always do that. So that's the CT side rules. Again, the summary on that being stay alive, make them deal with you. So again, don't force your fights if you don't have to. Kill time, make them come get you. Kill time for your teammates to rotate. And then the third one being don't feel like you need to always sacrifice yourself for a teammate. Try to when you can and when it's like doable and a good idea, or if it's required to win the round. But definitely don't get yourself killed because some teammate runs into ramp with an MP9. Don't be afraid to kind of follow your plan and come into the round with a plan. So then we're gonna talk a little bit about T side, and obviously I'm gonna still have an M4. Just remember we're talking about T side here. T side positioning is a little bit more nuanced in the sense that your goals kind of line up with your peaking. So we talked about slicing the pie in the last lecture. Well, with slicing the pie, that's a lot of your positioning because as you move and take angles, that's your positioning, right? That's what we're doing. That's our positioning. That's what we're up to. But T-side positioning really starts with two things. One, your default and your after plants. Those are a lot of your positioning as you go. And your default is basically until you get into the plant to try and after plant. So what the rules for these are, basically, again, 3 rules because 3 is good. 3 is a good number. Rule number 1 for defaulting is that you want to always have an idea of what's going on around you. And what I mean by that is you need to understand, like, if you really want to win games, you really want to be a good player, it might be okay for you to come up Palace every single round and do something for fun in a pug. Like, that's fine if you just want to try it out a bunch of times or you want to have fun. That's great. But if you're really trying to win, it's the key to playing, like, as a good teammate is recognizing when you need to just not. Like, when you need to just not put yourself in a position where you can't help your teammates, where you're not really being a team player, and where you're kind of just not being effective. And what that means is it might mean just like this. Like, so let's say all of our T friends are, they're all top mid. You got 3 top mid, and you're going towards B, and you realize, okay, I have another teammate going towards apps for a second, or he's just kind of waiting around. You might have to make that decision like, okay, I'm not going to go towards app. I'll just go help them in underpass. Because your whole team's in mid. Maybe you feel like you need to help him out, right? And this guy, you just don't quite know what he's doing because you're in a pug. That's the type of decision making that is about your positioning and your movement, but it's also just about being a good teammate and kind of putting yourself in positions to win games. Don't be afraid to sacrifice whatever play you had in your head to go help your team on T side, because your play might not end up mattering if everyone dies mid because nobody came underpass to help them or nobody came underpass to clear it. That's the type of thing where you might, win a game because you just decided, okay, I'll just go help my team. So do not be afraid as a T to change your plan you had in your head as the round started and go help your teammates. And this is mainly about pugs because obviously with a normal team, 5 people, you kind of have a better idea of what's going on. But in this scenario, like pugging is what you do a lot of the time when you play. Don't be afraid to try and be a good teammate. Try to work with them. Try to go near them. Don't feel like you always have to go do your own thing. And if you can really learn to sacrifice and say, okay, I'm not going to go default B this time. I'm going to go help them out. That's a great thing to do. The second thing I want to talk about is a little bit more in-game, a little bit more mechanical. In a sense, this is about when to take trades. So a good thing to understand about T-side positioning is that if your teammate, let's say, comes out ramp and instantly dies to the guy's CT. So let's say that you got the CT here, and then we have our ramp teammate here. It might be worth your effort to, swing out Palace and delete the guy, right? But you're probably going to die to jungle or stairs. So you have to think to yourself, okay, is that viable? Is that worth my effort? Is it just going to lead us into a worse version of this round? And what that means is, look, this guy's dead 4v5 instantly, right? You're standing here. Do you want to make it a 3v4 or a 3v5? A lot of the time the answer is going to be no. So something you have to learn to override is that desire to help. Same thing as we talked about on CT side, but on T. So it's kind of the opposite of what I just said a little bit, but not really. You're really just looking for those opportunities to keep yourself alive here. What we're worried about is like that desire of everyone has of like, oh, he died to stairs, and then you just like swing out into him. That's a viable fight, right? Like you can do that. It's up to your aim, your crosshair placement, your counter strafing to get you that kill, and it's not going to be exactly too risky. But if you come out and do that and you instantly die to close Palace, okay, well now you've just been like kind of unlucky. You kind of got yourself killed, and that's why it's good to kind of still weigh your options. Is it worth taking that risk of swinging out in front of the palace guy who might be there, or is it worth kind of just continuing on to what you were going to do? So you're coming default in here, you're holding, and then the guy dies to the stairs guy. You can swing out and try and kill him, and you might get traded. And that's sometimes great. You just have to understand that even in the most simple of trades, there's still a risk you're taking. So what you want to look to do is minimize that risk. So what that means is making predictions. So as a T, when you're positioning yourself, try to have an idea of what the outcomes are going to be. So what I mean by this is as you come up palace here, your outcomes are like this. Like jungle kills you, stairs kills you, or palace kills you, or someone sandwich ramp area kills you, right? Or you kill one of them. Those are kind of your outcomes. Those are the places you have to deal with. So as your teammates do things and you get more info, check off outcomes or get rid of them or make them higher priority because you think someone might actually be doing them. And then those come in to make your decision on how you want to position yourself and move around the map. So if your teammate's like, okay, one guy's jungle or one guy's peeking me window, one guy's peeking me connector, and then your teammate dies to CT, now you know, okay, I can take this risk because what you just learned is, okay, beginning of the round, guys in window, guys in connector, right? Okay, great, awesome. Teammate dies to CT, you can now assume most people play one guy window, two guys A. Your other A player is the connector player. CT's playing retake. He kills your teammate ramp. You swing out and kill him. Oh my lord. You swing out and kill him. Sorry. And then you come across right here and you deal with this, right? So that's one of those things where you make an assumption, you make a play based off of the information you have. And that's the type of positioning decisions that you need to be making that are meant to keep you alive. And they're meant to keep you also in rounds and getting good decisions in the sense of you might have to make an aggressive play sometimes. Just look for what you know and what your options are and kind of make a list in your brain and check them off as you're moving around. And then lastly on T sides, this is a little bit more simple. But one of the biggest issues that everyone runs into on T-side is knowing where to go. And so this is kind of like Rule 1, but it's a little bit more simple in the sense that with Rule 3, what I want you to think about is more like this. Where are we trying to go from the very beginning is a great question to ask your team because it'll just set you up. But also just watch your radar. Really, if this rule had a name, it was just the use your radar and use your radar to position yourself. So what that means is when your teammates are running all towards A, you might be over here like halfway to B and you realize, oh, we're all going A. Just turn around and go with them. Just like similar to Rule 1, but just watch your radar if you don't know what to do. If you ever feel lost or like you don't really know what to do, then you have two options here with Rule 3. Watch your radar and go with them, or watch your radar and say, okay, I'm just going to go here for now because I don't really know what else I would want to do. And what you're doing is basically just kind of choosing an option that works for you as a person. Like, okay, I feel like I can go mid and just try to help them out. And also works for your team. Like most of your teammates are mid. Like two of them, you can go help them mid. It's not going to be a huge deal. But also you have to look for other simple things like, okay, I have one guy A, three guys mid, one guy towards B. Okay, well, if you're the one guy towards B, you need to stay here, right? You've got to be the guy who goes and, like, kind of checks underpass, checks for B pushes. That's fine. But if you notice there's that huge gap, be the person to fill it. If you're just defaulting out, your team's just spreading out, especially in pugs, and you notice, like, there's a huge gap in your default and that, you know, they could just push B, they could just go default. Don't be afraid to be the guy that goes over there and fills it. Oftentimes, even if you don't know what to do, you can just look at your radar and it'll tell you what to do. It'll show you where your team's deficiencies are and where there are gaps that you need to fill, okay? So that's, like I said, that rule's really simple to try out and do. Next time you feel like you don't know what to do, look at your radar, see if there's a gap, see if there's a place that, you know, you could default to and hold or support your team at, and just kind of weigh your options and then go back to Rule 1 as the round progresses. Okay, we're all going towards A, I'm going to fall back now, I'm going to kind of give up on what I was doing and go back and help them. And then Rule 2, when you get into those fights, try and think, okay, where's it worth me to go fighting? Is it worth me swinging out underpass when my teammate dies to a guy connector? Should I probably swing out underpass? Yeah, a lot of the time you probably should, right? But should I swing out underpass if he dies and I hear the guy run away? No, you probably shouldn't go sprinting up, right? You want to keep like you want to make sure the CTs don't know where you are still, right? So you don't want to throw that away for no reason. So you got to kind of weigh your options, make sure you use all your info, and you don't just kind of follow, you know, through with whatever you're doing just because it was true 20 seconds ago. It might not be true anymore. But yeah, that's basically that's a lot of information about movement and positioning. Well, movement in the terms of where you put yourself, so positioning mainly. Basically, just try to use these things for your pugs, and even if for your teams. Try to kind of talk about these rules with teammates based off plays you're making, and try to just apply them in your game and see if you can kind of keep yourself alive longer, get more kills, be a little bit more effective in general, and if you see if you can just kind of apply these throughout. And a big way to practice this is to kind of just be like, okay, well, I'm going to play this spot on this map, and I'm going to get good at it, right? Just pick one, and then try to get it in your matchmakings, your pugs, your face-its, whatever. Try to get those spots that you can kind of repetitively play, and get good at one. And then you'll be able to apply that to other places pretty easily. Like, you can apply how to play towards Ramp and Palace pretty solidly in Connector, because you're still dealing with two things. You're just looking different directions. Just try to find a place you want to try out, try and think about these rules, try and use them, and then I'll see you in the next lecture.